an empire that once made all of Asia and Europe tremble, the Mongols. A fearsome cavalry storming from the Gobi Desert to the edge of the West, believing no nation could ever stand in their path. But they were wrong. Far to the south lay a small land called Viet, where people were ready to spill their own blood to defend their homeland, to use their very bodies to halt the enemy's advance. January 1258. Flames consumed Thanglang. As the mightiest empire in the world marched in, King Tren Tai Tong and his generals faced two choices: to fall or to rise. And they chose to rise. Rise amidst the fire. From the blood-soaked plains of Binglai Wen to the thunderous drums of Dong Bo Dao, the Vietnamese wrote an immortal epic. 12 days and nights that buried the Mongol ambition. The Battle of Dong Bo Dao, where a small nation made the world bow its head. If you loved the indomitable spirit of Vietnamese history, subscribe and join me on this journey through time.
January 1258. On the smoky plains of Binglai Wen, Mongol cavalry poured down like a raging flood. The earth shook, the heavens roared, the invaders' war horns thundered like midday storms. Before that unstoppable force, King Tren Tai Tong stood firm, calm, unyielding, his eyes fixed on the enemy lines. Beside him were loyal generals, men who knew that on this day they fought not merely for a throne, but for the soul of their nation. The battle erupted in fury. Arrows, blades, and horse cries fused into a symphony of blood and fire. Our soldiers fought with unmatched courage, yet against tens of thousands of Mongol horsemen, the defensive line began to waver. Amidst the chaos, when peril drew near, the king refused to retreat, vowing to fight and die with his men. But then, through the smoke, a young general rode forth, his eyes burning with resolve. Lei Tan. He knelt before the king, his voice echoing across the battlefield. Your Majesty, the realm is greater than any one life. To save you is to save our nation. Please, board the royal boat and return to Thanglang. The words struck like thunder in the heart of the wise king. For a brief moment, all fell silent. Then he nodded. Instantly, Lei Tan rallied his elite cavalry, carving a path of blood and flame through the encirclement. Arrows tore the sky, horses fell, yet the column surged forward like a river in flood. Through the storm of arrows, Lei Tan raised a wooden plank to shield his king, his body riddled with wounds. His blood spilled into the river, staining Binglai Wen crimson. As the royal boat reached safety, Pham Ku Trich and Fu Luang Hao held the rear, fighting to the last breath. Knowing death was near, Pham Ku Trich roared, "As long as the dragon boat lives, Viet lives!" Then he charged straight into the Mongol ranks, turning his body into a torch of defiance. That flank perished, but the retreat was secured. Those heroes needed no stone monuments, for their blood became the jewels engraved within the river's heart. As the king looked back upon the battlefield, his hands trembled as he vowed, "I will return. Binglai Wen shall not be our end." And thus began the royal retreat, not an escape, but the prelude to a glorious counter-strike.
That night, the northern wind lashed like whips. On the dark waters of the Phu Lo River, boats, heavy with the wounded, drifted silently downstream. Behind them, the flames of Binglai Nguyen still blazed high, painting the sky over Thanglang in crimson light. When King Tren Tai Tong landed ashore, Chan Tu Do was already there, his figure standing tall and unyielding like a statue in the winter wind. The king looked at him and sighed softly. "Thang Long has fallen. My heart feels torn apart." Chun Tu-do smiled faintly, his voice sharp and resolute. "As long as my head still rests on my shoulders, Your Majesty, must not worry." Those words struck like fire into the frozen night. For a moment, all fell silent. Then the soldiers knelt as one, shouting, "Live for our land! Die for our land!" That night, Chun Tu-do proposed a retreat to Tianmak, a fortress surrounded by rivers and swamps. But this was no flight. It was a move of genius, a step back to gather strength, to strike a blow so fierce the enemy would never recover. While Dai Viet's royal court quietly regrouped, the Mongols stormed into Thang Long, drunk with fury. Yuryang Kadai believed he had seized the capital, but found only empty streets, shattered houses, and deserted granaries. Not a soul, not a grain of rice. Thang Long had become a ghost city, a colossal trap set by the Vietnamese. Enraged, Yuryang Kadai roared for the city to be burned. 61 districts went up in flames. The inferno devoured not only Thang Long, but also the pride of an empire that once terrified all of Asia. Meanwhile, at Tianmak, King Chon gathered his generals. Torchlight shimmered on the river's surface as 100 sunburnt faces bowed beneath the moon, vowing, "Every inch of land is our ancestors' blood and soul. Alive we defend it, dead we never yield." From that night on, their hatred turned to steel, and that steel became unbreakable will. The flame of Tianmak was lit, quiet, steadfast, waiting for the day it would rise and burn away the invaders' ambition.
The Tianmark River lay shrouded in mist. Cold winds swept across the barren plains. But inside the Dai Viet camp, thousands of torches burned bright, a forest of stars against the night. The air was thick with smoke, iron, and the dry scent of blood, a warning of the storm about to fall upon the invaders. At the center of the camp stood King Trân Tai Tong, draped in crimson armor, eyes gleaming like steel. Before him, his greatest generals, Trân Tu-do, steadfast as stone, Trân Quoc Tuân, calm and calculating, Trân Kang Yu, fire blazing in his gaze, and Li Tun, still bearing the wounds of Bing Lei Nguyen. The war drum thundered, the earth trembled. The king rose, his voice rolling like thunder. "They have burned our Thang Long, but that same fire shall be the flame that burns them. Every inch of this land is our ancestors' flesh and bone. To lose it is to betray the nation." A roar erupted from the camp. Spears lifted high, striking against armor, a metallic storm echoing across the Tianmark River. Trân Tu-do laughed, swinging his sword through the air. "Give the order, Your Majesty, and Tianmark shall become a storm of steel." Meanwhile, far to the north, Trân Quoc Tuan's detachment moved under the cover of night. At dawn, torches flared across the hills. The Dai Viet army had surrounded the Mongol supply camp. Fire! Flaming arrows rained down, igniting every storehouse in a sea of fire. The horizon turned red. Horses screamed. Mongol soldiers fled in chaos. The empire of endless victories now engulfed in flames. From the mountain ridge, Trân Quoc Tuân watched, his face cold as iron. Without supplies, they will die. Without spirit, they will fall. Now, Dai Viet strikes back. Word reached the Mongol camp. Inside, Yuryang Kadai slammed his cup against the table, wine splashing across his armor. The Vietnamese cut off our supplies? Those savages dare challenge the Mongol horde? But then a scout burst in, pale as death. "General, the horses have no grass. The rations are gone. Men are deserting. Dai Viet troops surround the riverbanks." Yuryang Kadai froze. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. He understood. Dai Viet now held the upper hand. That night, Tien Marc did not sleep. Hundreds of warships lined the shore, drums and gongs echoing through the darkness. Hooves, waves, and battle cries blended into one mighty rhythm, the heartbeat of a nation rising from the ashes. King Tren Tai Tong stepped onto the royal flagship Kim Fung. He gazed into the storming sky and shouted, "Strike back, for Thang Long, for Dai Viet!" The drums rolled. 1,000 oars struck the water, spray flying like shards of ice. 40,000 elite soldiers surged forward towards Dong Bo Do. The sound of waves, drums, and battle cries merged into one roar, the roar of a nation reborn. Meanwhile, in ruined Thang Long, the Mongol troops starved and despaired. They did not know that, beneath the shroud of night, thousands of Dai Viet sails were slicing through the darkness, like great arrows aimed at the heart of their empire. The east wind rose. The moon hid behind clouds. Drums thundered closer and closer. The Battle of Dong Bo Do, the clash that would decide the fate of a nation, was about to begin.
The third watch of the night. Tung Long lay buried in its own ashes. Among blackened walls, embers still flickered, like the dying breath of a wounded beast. Inside his war tent, Urian Kadai sat sleepless, his eyes bloodshot with rage. Outside, only the sound of starving horses and groaning soldiers. He did not know that beneath the rolling currents of the Hong River, the Dai Viet army was already there. Thousands of warships glided in silence, sails furled, torches doused, only pale moonlight glinting off steel. The east wind rose, carrying the chill of mud and blood, a whisper of the battle to come. On the lead ship stood Crown Prince Tran Wang, his sword gleaming like starlight. Beside him, his deputy Kui King murmured, "Your Majesty, the wind has changed." Behind them, aboard the royal flagship Kim Fung, King Tran Tai Tong lifted his sword toward Tung Long. "The hour of Dai Viet has come." The drums sounded once, twice, then 100-fold. The river exploded into life. 1,000 oars struck the water. Waves surged white as snow. The fleet shot forward like arrows, racing toward Dong Bo Do. On the shore, infantry and war elephants lay in wait. Their bronze armor shimmered in the firelight, moving like golden statues come alive. Cavalrymen tightened their reins, eyes blazing. When the first ships touched land, General Tran Kanju raised his crimson banner and roared, "Charge! Sat Hat! Strike down every invader!" The shout rolled like thunder. Thousands stormed ashore, crashing through the Mongol lines like a tidal wave. Arrows rained. Fire, smoke, and dust merged with the roar of battle. Horses screamed, men fell, blood sprayed, but the Dai Viet warriors did not stop. On the left flank, war elephants smashed the Mongol cavalry, armor clashing, blades ringing in a storm of steel. Lei Tan's horsemen tore into the center, their swords flashing like lightning. Dozens of enemies fell in a single breath. Behind them, fire arrows and catapults rained down. The Mongol camp erupted in flame, smoke rising, the stench of burning flesh thick in the air. Urian Kadai leapt to his feet, shouting, "Counterattack! Fight back!" But it was too late. The once invincible Mongol horde dissolved into chaos. Men running, horses thrashing, screams swallowed by fire. The hunters had become the hunted. From the western ridge, Tran Quoc Tuan gave the signal. 3 sides blazed red with fire. Infantry, cavalry, and war elephants closed in, a storm of iron crushing the enemy. The Hong River glowed with flame, its surface littered with the fallen, mingled with burning rafts and wreckage.
Before dawn, the sky above Tanglong shone red, not from sunrise, but from victory's fire. Uriang Kadai looked around. Soldiers dead, drums silenced, horses collapsed. He screamed hoarsely, "Retreat! Break through and retreat!" But before him was only hell. On the river, Viet ships lined the banks, archers with bows drawn. On land, elephants and cavalry sealed every path. No escape. Uriang Kadai fled, abandoning his treasures, his men, his pride. Behind him, King Tren thundered his order, "Pursue them! Leave not a single one alive!" The drums of vengeance roared. Viet's army chased them to the river's mouth, spears gleaming like stars, their reflections blazing red on the bloodied waters. In a single night, just one night, the army that had conquered half the world was shattered beneath the swords of Viet. When dawn broke, the waters of Dongbodo reflected the colors of fire, blood, and sky. Tanglong awakened, no longer to the sound of Mongol hooves, but to the echoing drums of victory. Dongbodo, Viet has triumphed.
At dawn the next morning, the Hong River lay unnaturally still. Sunlight rippled across the surface, reflecting countless crimson stains that had yet to fade. They were not only the blood of Mongol soldiers, but the scarlet seal marking Viet's name into the history of mankind. The first nation ever to shatter the invincible army of the Mongol Empire. Uriang Kadai, who once rode victorious from Western Asia to Jinling, now fled like a wounded beast through ashes and ruin. He cast aside his armor, his insignia, fleeing north bareback, desperate to live. Along the retreat, Mongol corpses littered the fields, their horses piled in heaps. Each time they passed a village, the people of Viet rose to strike, villagers with spears and scythes cutting down the retreating horde like waves chasing a dying storm. At Bukhak, Sun Vi, Phung Luc, local militias joined the pursuit, slaughtering every straggler that remained. By the time the invaders reached Quy Hoa, Chieftain Hab Bung had already sealed their path, setting fire to the grass, choking their horses in smoke. Panic spread. Men trampled men, bodies rolled into ravines, their blood carried away by the river's flow. When the survivors finally crossed the border, fewer than 5,000 remained from tens of thousands, their eyes hollow, their souls burned out by terror. From that day on, the Mongols never again dared to underestimate the small nation of the south. On the banks of Dongbodo, amid the smoldering battlefield, King Tran Tai Tong walked silently among his fallen warriors. The wind lifted his blood-stained cloak. His gaze stopped at a broken mast, at spears still trembling in the breeze. Softly, but with a voice deep as a temple bell, he said, "Viet stands today because of your blood. Your name shall live forever in these rivers and mountains." Nearby, Chan Tu Do picked up a shattered sword, planted it in the earth, and bowed his head. "Your Majesty, from this day forth, the world shall know, Viet never kneels." The generals and soldiers fell to their knees as one, their cry of Vun Tue, echoed with the pounding of victory drums, rolling across the skies of Dongbodo. In that moment, king and general, soldier and citizen, nation and people became one. That unity was the secret to Viet's immortality. From that victory, the Tran Yet jeweled rebuilt Thonglong. Streets came alive again. The sound of hammers and forges rang out. The spirit of Dong Ah had risen. Soon after, Tran Chan Tang Tong and Tran Kok Tuan would carry that flame forward, defeating the Mongol Yuan armies 3 times over the next half-century. And it all began with the fiery Battle of Dongbodo in the year 1258. People still say, 12 days, that buried an empire. But louder than the victory itself was the spirit it left behind, the spirit that fought with wisdom over might,
unity over fear, and the fire of patriotism that burned down every ambition of conquest. After the victory, the skies over Thong Long were clear again. The Hong River wind carried the scent of gunpowder and flowers as the people gathered on the banks, casting petals upon the crimson waters, a farewell to those who had fallen for their land. From the ashes, a nation emerged, stronger, prouder, unbreakable. It was not only the first triumph against the Mongol war machine, but the birth of the Dong-A spirit, a well of steel that made the world bow in awe. A dynasty had proven a truth for all ages. No nation is small when its people stand tall as mountains. No weapon is stronger than the will of those who defend their homeland. From Dongbodo, that fire spread to Hamtu, Chongyang, and Bukdang, and for a half-century, the Mongol Yuan armies would fall again and again before Đại Việt. History has closed those pages, but the drums of 1258 still echo through Thong Long in every step of the Vietnamese people today. When you cross the Chongyang Bridge, when you stand by the Long Bien Wharf, remember, beneath these waters once raged a sea of fire, where our ancestors defended every inch of their homeland with their lives. The victory of Dongbodo was not merely a triumph of the 13th century. It was a vow carried through generations. Even 1,000 years from now, should any invader set foot on this land, Vietnamese blood will flow once more, and the flame of Dong-A shall rise again.